Greetings, you wonderfully patient people. Welcome back to Heads and Tails. After a brief hiatus filled with anticipation, it is extremely thrilling to return with a special episode straight from the enchanting environs near Chiang Dao Mountain. This time with video. My recent journey has been nothing short of magical, traversing landscapes and soaking in every single moment along the way. Today is an absolute delight to bring you a vibrant conversation recorded amidst the vibrant energy of the Shambala festival. What's more is that you can watch us have the conversation on YouTube. Joining us is the incredibly talented Kyer, a seasoned photographer whose lens captures not just images, but stories woven with light and shadow. From humble beginnings, snapping shots of nature and fellow adventurers in California during rock climbing escapades with his father, Kyer's path has led him to the mesmerizing realms of events such as Burning Man, where his photographs illuminate the spirit of the festivities, particularly the captivating performances of fire troops. But Kyer's work isn't just about captivating visuals. It's celebrating what makes us human, expressing ourselves through music, dance, and garments. With Kyer, we delve into the artistry of photography, its practicality as a career, and the profound connection it fosters with the world around us. Also, in our conversation, Kyer shed light on pressing global issues like habitat loss and environmental degradation. What Kyer says about this is not what we want to hear, but I think it is what we need to hear. So sit back and immerse yourself in this captivating dialogue. Let Kyer's insights spark your passion for exploration and appreciation of the great outdoors.
He's the wonder. Okay.
I'll get things going here. I traditionally like to ask people how they define themselves. I can do a sloppy job of introducing you to my audience, but I would love you to introduce yourself, tell them where we are right now, and we can start from there.
Okay, so we are at, first my name's Kyer Wiltshire. I've been a photographer for over 20 years, and I've published 4 books, and the one that you see here is the first one that I published actually in 2009. It's called Travel Revival.
First ever one?
The first book, yeah, I'd published calendars before that, and this is the first book I published in 2009. It was about West Coast festival culture, so not just specifically to festivals, but the culture that's part of that, and it makes up that. And Burning Man, of course, is probably the main festival in the book. We are at a festival called Shambala here in northern Thailand. I would describe it as Japanese hippie meets Thai hippie meets Western hippie. And it's sweet. We got a river running through it, creek, and it's a lovely time of year to be here. We have Chiang Dao Mountain rising not far from us, so it's a beautiful spot.
They say Chiang Dao Mountain. I don't know how much you know about this mountain, but Juan told me they keep discovering new species in this mountain. Do you think that adds to the vibe that we're feeling here, or is it just, like random?
So I will use that as a segue to talk about what is a camp out festival versus, so we're at a camp out, we're here, this is 10 days. Not everybody's been here for 10 days, but people have been here for at least a few days. And I think when you have the container of nature, it really changes what you can explore and what you can experience, right? So the book that I did, Travel Revival, is about camp out festivals. It's not like go to a festival where you go to a rock band and then you're staying at a hotel type of thing. Camp out festivals means you're all here with your stuff in your tent, in the case of Burning Man, often in your RV, but you're in nature. Even Burning Man is nature. It's in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere in Nevada. And I think having that container of Mother Nature, I think allows people to open up more and to drop in and to feel what's around them and feel held by that. Yeah.
So I still want to linger on the nature part and how it affects the whole festival dynamics, but just to sort of explore your first few, photographs that you've ever taken in your life. Also, I read that you uh, heard from other people that you have this ability to capture the essence of people. So, how did that feel? Like, when did you first get that remark, and how did you sort of continue to do it? Was it because other people were like, "Oh yeah, like your work is great," or more like, "Hey, I'm having so much fun doing this right now. Like, I'll do it regardless."
Okay, so if we're talking about my life as a photographer, it starts as an amateur going back many years ago, growing up backpacking and climbing with my dad and taking pictures of people in nature. And so that was really my inspiration to capture nature and to capture people in it, to show where we are in nature, how we're experiencing nature. And then from there, in the 90s, I spent a lot of time in Latin America. You probably heard me speak Spanish with Juan, and that's my second language. That was my life in the 90s, spending a lot of time in Mexico, other countries, and photographing the native people there. And that's sort of what got me into people photography. What got me into the photography of this, what I would call West Coast festival culture, is that in 2000, I went to a place in the Santa Cruz Mountains, where Santa Cruz is my main base, and there was a place called the Goddess Temple, and this woman named Penny Slinger, who was a middle-aged woman at the time, she was an eccentric artist who had nude paintings of, or I should say paintings of nude Arawak Indians, people from the Caribbean, on her walls. And it was a place, it was a container where they had these midnight raves. And what I experienced there, what I photographed was, wow. Like, I want to be part of this. This is amazing. And so I got my first digital camera in 2000. And yeah, it was a 3.25 megapixel camera. It was about $3,000. And I could get instant feedback, right? And I remember this fire dancing performance, fire photography, I should say. Fire dance photography is one of my main passions. I shot it for Burning Man for 20 years. I shot Burning Man, and 15 years of that I either photographed for Burning Man or for different fire troops that perform out there. And I remember,
While you're still on Burning Man, I'm just curious, genuinely curious. How is it different than any other festival? Like, as a burner, quote unquote burner, how would you describe the main difference of Burning Man compared to any other festival?
well, first of all, Burning Man's changed a lot, and I could talk about that, but I would still say the basic ethos of Burning Man exists. How is it different? First of all, I mean, it's probably the most amazing party on the planet, if you want to call it a party. It could be anything. It could be a party. It could be a transformative experience.
Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so in a lot of these festivals that are in my book, I would consider them transformative festivals, and many that I photographed over the years would call them transformational festivals, in the sense that, again, you don't just go to the rock concert and get entertained. You actually drop in to the festival. You have experiences that may change your life, may change your perspective on the world, and transformation is really nothing more than a change in perspective, right? So Burning Man allows that. Burning Man is, I mean, the amount of money, time, and creativity that goes into creating that, both in the infrastructure and what people bring. What I love about Burning Man is you are part of the entertainment. You are there to also entertain. You're not there just to spectate. Yeah, no, you're there to be part of the show. And I go to Burning Man because that's what it allows you to do. I mean, and there are big DJs that perform out there. That's not why I go. I'm not even personally into that type of music, but I love just the whole container that's created out there. And one positive way the Burning Man has changed is become much more international. So you have a lot more people from around the world. It used to be more of a West Coast, California, maybe Canadian festival, and it's changed that way in a good way in the last 20 years. That people from all the world come there. And what makes it different? I mean, I guess the pictures speak better than what I could describe it, except to say that you're in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, in a place that you probably wouldn't want to go to if there weren't a festival, because it's very dry and alkaline, like bed. And just, again, the amount of creativity that's out there, it's one thing, it's fun to see people go for the first time and they're just blown away. They're like, wow, I've seen pictures, but wow, never realized what it was like. and you have to experience. The other thing I will say is you could go to Burning Man and have a completely different experience than I had. You could see things that I didn't see, and I could see things that you didn't see, and they could be amazing things that you saw and I didn't see. So it's big. It's 80,000 people. It's the only ephemeral city on the planet that doesn't work on commerce. I mean, so you need to spend a lot of money to get there.
Coffee, ice.
Yeah, it's funny, they sell ice. They used to sell coffee, and that changed with COVID or something. I don't know why they don't sell coffee anymore, but I don't believe they do, which is too bad because that was a nice place to go in center camp and get coffee. At least the last time I was there, which was 2022, and that was, by the way, my 20th consecutive year at Burning Man. They sold coffee, and that was great. You go to center camp, you could buy coffee, but I believe it's just ice is the only thing you can purchase there. So it is, ironically, anti-commercial event. Like most festivals, even here, you see we have vendors selling coffee and selling food, and Burning Man does not have that. But to get there, you're going to Costco and the big warehouses to buy your stuff for your camp, and nails and hammers and everything you need out there, because you have to bring your own shelter. You have to bring, or your camp has to provide it. You're, again, on a dry lake bed where there is no shelter, and the conditions can be very harsh, for sure. So I don't know if that distinguishes it enough from other festivals, except to say there is nothing like Burning Man. There's nothing like Burning Man.
I think the most interesting part you mentioned was the aspect of you are actively contributing to the festival experience. I've never been to a festival where I was just passive, like even here. Oh, okay, maybe I can join some workshops and be a part of the fun, but I'm not actively sort of adding value to the environment per se. And I find that, teaching languages, if you make the experience for the child, for the recipient, for the student in a way where like they're also like teaching themselves, I find that it's way more productive, and they retain a lot more information. So I think it applies the same for the festivals, like to be a part of the experience. What do you say about that?
Well, I think your experience is a lot deeper, for sure, if you're a participant. So not every, it's not like a straight line. It's, there's a lot. One could say that one could go to Burning Man and just kind of be a spectator. But generally, again, you even if it's just hanging out in camp and dropping in with your campmates, you can have a life-changing experience out there. And here, yeah, workshops are a way to participate. Some of the other festivals that I photographed, for example, that are in my book, there's a festival called Fairy Worlds. It's in Oregon, and people dress up as fairies. So the idea of showing up with the intention of costuming, is a way of participating. You're expressing, maybe it's through your jewelry and your garb, your clothing. You're participating in that way. And then, there's other things. Maybe you're in a parade. One thing about Burning Man that's amazing is you could spontaneously join something, and all of a sudden you're part of this parade, and so that's magical, and that's really cool. And you're right, you do learn better, you do experience more when you're participating rather than just standing back and looking at it. But yeah, even here, like this morning, I saw people doing yoga and with the mountain in the background, and that's participating. You're out there and you're watching people doing their sun salutations at sunrise. That's participating. You're there because you're part of the, I don't know if you call it entertainment, but you're part of the event that way. You're out there. And I think even just, you can maybe say something as simple as engaging others is participating, right? And again, that's not as, you could say any festival you can do that in. But I think, again, where you drop in and bring something, people are bringing different things here. Maybe they're playing music. They've got their guitar. Maybe they're even selling something, their jewelry. That's a way of participating. Your GoPro just fell out. Oh. Okay, there you go. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yes. That's very thoroughly, might I add. So thank you so much. I want to switch gears a bit more because I heard you mention that you went out to camp with your father and climb. Tell me more about that, and also perhaps try to think about how it, found manifestation in your life today, with the things that you do and with the kind of experiences that you sort of capture the essence of, let's say.
Well, I guess it relates to two things. One, it was a wonderful bonding experience to share that with my father growing up. I think I did my first hike when I was 4 and my first mountain when I was 11.
Nice.
And like a serious mountain in the Wind River Range in Wyoming. We would go there a lot as a teen. Um,
Was that in Minnesota?
no, the Wind River Range is in western Wyoming. And I grew up in Oregon, so we've got tons of nature there. I mean, Portland, where I grew up, is a city plopped in the middle of nature. And so that was great to experience that with him when you're young, to challenge yourself that way physically and to overcome the fear of heights and the carrying a backpack
Are you still afraid of heights?
no, I've never been afraid of heights
Oh,
actually.
never been.
No, but I would say just in general. I mean, we everybody has a healthy fear of heights. I hope, right? I do, but I wouldn't say that I'm afraid of heights. Abnormally afraid of heights, but just that you're up on a mountain, you've got to navigate things, you've got to route find. That was really empowering to do as a teenager. More than that, I would say my experience with nature. Sometimes it's not a joke really. Actually, I say that nature is my finest lover because she holds a space for me and everybody else, and she has a wisdom. I say she, but nature has a wisdom that it goes beyond anything that we, individual humans, can come up to have or be able to experience, right? So she holds that container for us.
Would you say humans are a part of that wisdom?
Well, we are nature, and we are in nature, and I think that, I think it's most of us realize that nature is we're connected, and we can't live without her, and she's very important, and we need to be good stewards of the planet, and again, not to go on a tangent with talking about loss of habitat, wildlife habitat, but that's a real issue. And also climate change is a real issue. You know, I grew up in Oregon, and I'm kind of amazed and shocked. I climb up on one of the volcanoes there, and I've been doing since I was a teenager, and I look out over the landscape, and I'm thinking, wow, 50% of these forests have been burnt in the last 20 years.
What?
Yeah.
50%?
Yeah, that's just that's not a statistic I'm giving you as a fact. I'm giving you just my observation, looking out over the mountains of Oregon, the Cascade Range, and looking around and going,
Better than any stat.
wow. I look around and go, God, about half of this area has been burnt in say the last 20, okay, maybe 30 years. So an incredible amount of loss to the forest there. And then, of course, the more humans we have, the more buildings we make, and the more encroachment we have on nature, all that impacts. And I think most of us, regardless of what your politics are around climate change and how much you believe it's man-made, etc., I think we all agree that we're losing a lot of nature in this world, and that's an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I second that. I think a lot of concern is just for, like you said, just building more, just accommodating more people, just making their lives easier with minimum to no regard to, like this wise entity that we're a part of. That's why I asked that question. I think this, it's kind of going into a philosophical direction, but to humans to outsmart nature or like outwit nature or sort of like, oh, like I'm the master of this everything, it's definitely hubris, but at the same time I think it might not end well for humans as we're a part of that system. So when you try to control, when you try to be a master of that, you're actually trying to impose on yourself. So I don't know, do you have any ideas on how we can reverse it, or even like maybe slow down the sort of deterioration that's happening?
Well, I would say two things. One is, I would say you can look at it from either a human-centric point of view, or you can look at it from a whole world point of view. And if you want to look at it just from a human-centered point of view, yeah, we're not doing ourselves any favor. Unfortunately, a lot of people, I see a couple things going. One, a lot of people look at, for many years and throughout history, people have seen nature as something to be exploited. How many trees can we chop down? How many, what can we get from nature, right? And so there's that aspect. And then there's what I would say a hypocrisy that every one of us live. Everybody of us who is consumers, who talk about, well, we're going to live more sustainably. And I hear that talk, but I don't see people walking that talk. And I have a lot of friends who talk that. I have wealthy friends who live in large homes and who are passionate about climate change and like to point fingers at corporations, oil companies, and yet they drive cars and they live in homes that are way bigger than they need to live in. So I believe there's a hypocrisy. I'm not, unfortunately, optimistic in the sense that, if I look at the change of the planet the last 30 years, China, Indonesia, India, everybody wants Western style of living or Western standard of living. And I don't see that going away. And if anything, it's going to be harder and harder. If you look at all the animals that are consumed, there's something like 70 billion animals that we eat on the planet. This is a statistic that I like to throw out there in terms of loss of habitat, and how we impact the planet with the animals that we eat. And again, I'm not a vegetarian, so I'm a hypocrite alone there. But I try to stay away from things like red meat. And 10,000 years ago, humans and their animals that we either ate or that we used for beasts of burden, land-based mammals, okay, so mammals on land, we were 0.5% of the land-based mammals on the planet. Again, the biomass, 10,000 years ago, the biomass being the weight of everything, right? Humans and their animals, what we ate, what we used to grow crops or whatever, 10,000 years ago. On land mammals, today we're 95%. No. We are 95% of, and our animals are 95% of the land-based mammal biomass. Now, some people say, I've heard also somebody, I'd say that's 95%. And so, wow, we're, yeah, I mean, some people might say we're a parasite on the planet. Now, I think that's kind of anti-human, but in some ways we are. And I'm not here to say that anybody should live a different lifestyle in the sense that, again, people in Asia and other places, they want to live at our standard of living, and who am I to tell them that they can't, right? And we all consume. So when I hear people say, oh, it's the fault of the oil companies, no, it's actually not the fault of the oil companies. So the people who consume that oil. All of us consume oil. All of us consume, whether we're heating our home or driving our car or our motor scooter or whatever it is that we're consuming, we are contributing. And so I'm not optimistic about it getting better. I believe that environmental awareness and technology can help, and maybe we can find energy sources down the line that will help us have a cleaner burning energy, but we're still going to be consuming, and maybe, again, we could have the technology of meat that's grown in labs that tastes better than any meat we have today. That would be great, because that's another environmental impact. But looking at the level of consumption that keeps growing, even if in the West, let's say in America, we manage to consume way less, and we manage to have policies that allow us to have a better, policies that are better for the environment and better stewards, the rest of the planet is going to continue to do what it's doing.
I love the way because this was my argument to people as well. It's like, oh, like I live in a big house. I didn't turn off the tap. I didn't turn off the electric, whatever. I would always say, oh, yeah, well, the big companies need to, sort their shit out, basically. But you're turning that finger and pointing it back to us because, I mean, the reason why these companies exist is because you consume this, whatever they're offering. So if you want any change, significant change, it has to start from yourself. There's no finger pointing in, oh, you should do this, they should do that. It's really not going to get us anywhere. It's just the being mindful of your own consumption, being mindful of, at the very, Buddhist level, I think, breathing is being very conscious of the oxygen that you consume, They're like, you're trying to take deep, long breaths rather than shallow, just fast breaths. And I think this part of the world kind of understands that, fundamentally, but also the globalization is, dragging people towards some Western way of living. I don't know. I kind of feel optimistic for this part of the world, that they would still stay true to, this way of existing. What do you say? In Thailand, Indonesia, India?
I'm not optimistic at all. I've been coming to Thailand for over 20 years. I came here in 2001, and I look at the amount of packaging that they have on their products. It's higher than the U.S. They package everything. There is the amount of plastic that floating in the ocean is something like the size of, I don't know how many hundreds of square or thousands of square miles it is of just plastic out there in the ocean. And 90% of it comes from 10 rivers. 90% of it comes from 10 rivers. 9 of those rivers are in Asia. So Thailand is better than Bali. If you go to Bali, I don't know if you've been to Bali. I love Bali. The people are wonderful. They're the most content people on the planet. They know how to raise children. It's a very conservative religious culture, but they are not good stewards of their island. There's plastic everywhere. They look at plastic like leaves. And for them, it used to be that they ate their food wrapped in banana leaves. And when you were done, you discarded the banana leaf and it would biodegrade. Now they discard their plastic. And they don't even see it. They don't even see it. And that's in a lot of places in Asia. And, if you look in China, again, I'm not here to say anybody shouldn't have our standard of living. The amount of meat consumption in China has gone up astronomically in the last 30 years, especially pig, which, as we know, is a very intelligent animal. And again, I eat pork, so I'd be a hypocrite not to say that people shouldn't eat pork meat. But the amount of the amount of environmental degradation that goes along with those type of animals, cows in particular. Yeah, I'd like to say we're going to work it out, and I feel bad for your generation. I'm 60, and with a little luck, I'll be around for 20 or 30 years. But I don't know. I'm not. I believe that there is a movement for environmental change and more awareness, and that technology holds possibility. So there's maybe something there to be optimistic about. But in terms of consumption, that ain't going down. Yeah, short of some major catastrophe, which we also don't want.
Ooh, okay. No. It's actually a good news flash for people my age and younger generation. I like the same way you feel, the way you feel about my generation. I feel the same way for my brother's generation, which is like 14 years younger than me. I don't know what kind of world they're going to be living in, to be perfectly honest. I can't even imagine or picture it. But I do think there's going to be more festivals. Will you be out to photograph them?
Well, yeah, certainly there'll be more festivals, and that's a good thing. And I think these festivals, yeah, I think there's, what I found in the festival community, one of the reasons that people come to these festivals is we're all looking for connection. And these festivals hold a wonderful container for the right people. Not everybody wants to come to this hippie festival and get dirty, but for the right people, they hold a wonderful container. Am I going to be out photographing more festivals? That is a good question. I'm going to say generally no. I mean, I did Burning Man for 20 years. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. I was photographing for my book that you see here, and then selling my book pretty solidly for 10 or 12 years, and doing 10 or 12 festivals a year. And I would recharge there'd be like Thursday through Sunday would be the festival, Monday through Wednesday I recharge in nature. It was a great lifestyle. I was a Spanish professor for many years, and so I had my summers off, and that allowed me to do these festivals. I was in California, teaching in several universities there, and so I see myself attending some festivals. My focus has been more on being in nature. I love to rock climb. I love to hike. And just when I'm in America, I spend a lot of time. I find that America, by the way, is a challenging place to be, as you know, sort of energetically. But what I love about America more than anything, and what I'm proud about in America, is we have some of the most beautiful, pristine, easy to access nature in the world. I mean, the level of beauty that we have in the West in particular, California alone, I mean, we've got desert, we've got mountains, we've got coastline, we've got forests.
That's why the tech industry just set up there.
We have, even the Bay Area has some of the most, I heard somewhere that it has the largest amount of open space of any metropolitan area in America, like open space where you can go hiking in nature. And then, you go 4 hours to the east to Yosemite, and you're in the spectacular mountains of the Sierras. So um, I, I consider, I see nature being part of my life until I die. Festivals, some here and there. It was really cool to kind of come here spontaneously and meet you. And I love, again, it's around the connection and to see what people are doing. There's people who spin fire, and it's fun to photograph fire dancers and people doing edgy things. And there's the whole acro yoga community here, which I photographed in Chiang Mai here and there, and that's fun. Like getting people doing co-creating with them around their talents. So I see myself doing it somewhat. Am I done with Burning Man for good? No. I could go back if I had a purpose to go out there. My purpose for years was shooting it. Like, in the last, for 15 years, 10, maybe 10, 12 years, at least, I shot for different fire troops. And so that was my purpose, to be out there. And then the last 5 years at Burning Man, I shot for Burning Man. And that was an honor to be a small team of photographers who photographed the fire dancers around the Great Circle on Saturday night. And among other things, we had like a Tuesday fire shoot where fire performers would show up and we do portraits for them. And so if I have a reason to be, I think it's really important to me personally. If you're going to spend your life coming to festivals, you want to have a reason to come. You want to have a purpose. And for me, it was mostly photography. And in a way, that's how I participated in my own way, the way how I interacted. Because your camera can open up a world just the way you interact with people, right? And you could also open up the world interacting with people through your music or through your art in general. So the long, short answer to your question is yes, but not as much. Yeah, we have different things that we go through in life. And like I say, nature is the one constant, will always be there. And I think peripherally, festivals will be part of my life, but not as much as they were in the past, and that's been true. Yeah.
So I'm curious about. I don't do much photography, but they do like people when I take photos of them. They do say I kind of have an eye for margins or what do you call them? I forget the technical term for it.
You mean the margins, the boundary of the photos, the framing of the photo?
Composition.
Composition.
Yeah. But I do understand that it's like a relationship that you get into in that moment with your object and like the person who has the camera. So can you just talk to that a little bit?
So I do see photographing people when I'm engaging people. Sometimes I do candid photography, but really the best photos I get are where I'm engaging people. And even if I'm not directing them, I'm still interacting with them. They know I'm there with the camera. I think it's a wonderful creative relationship. It can be, and it's edgy, and it requires this book that you're looking at, by the way. It's like technically, or I should say artistically, it's not my best work. I mean, in other words, I've done work since then that is certainly a higher level photography. I'm a much better photographer than I was when this book came out, when I shot for this book. But what this book does represent is a lot of extroverted energy, a lot of I'm here. You don't know me, but I'm here to photograph you. And I had sometimes I would have a decal around my neck that shows I'm the photographer for that festival. Other times at Burning Man, it's just how you show up and how you carry yourself that makes it possible. And also being very sober and very aware, like, am I pushing too much of an edge here? Maybe people don't want to be photographed. Yeah, being open to that, being sober, that you are aware. And even still, one could say you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. So there's still a risk that you're going to offend people or make people unhappy with how they've been photographed or interacted with. But I try my best to be aware and sensitive to people's desires. And it brings me great joy to, like, I don't know, over the years, how many people I photographed. If I had a nickel for everybody who used a photo on Instagram or Facebook that I took of them, that I created with them, I would have a lot of money. But this type of photography, the festival photography, is mostly a labor of love. So are my 4 books. I make a living as a wedding photographer and portrait photographer and working for other people. You mentioned something before that I didn't answer. I would say that my favorite, or I should say that the compliment that touches me most when I get from people is not, wow, that's a beautiful photograph. I mean, I always appreciate people's positive feedback about my work. I appreciate even more somebody has a constructive criticism for somebody that I respect. Doing the books that I've done, especially my latest book, working with a really good book designer and getting her feedback on images was amazing. And by the way, that book's called, it's on my website. It's called, and I don't know if you'll include my website on your podcast, but I have several websites. And this one's called, I'll show it to you later. You haven't seen it yet, but it's called Natural Beauty. So there's 100 women from around the world, all the major continents, nude in nature. And I shot a lot of it in Asia and in Burning Man and on the West Coast. And working.
Particularly Asian one?
No. No. There's a diversity of women for sure, and of ethnicities for sure in the book. And we have 20 essays in the book, and we have English, we have Russian, we have Spanish, French, and Chinese.
Wow.
Yeah, the essays. And I didn't bring the book to the festival here. I brought this one instead, but I have a copy in Chiang Mai. But going back to what I was going to say before, the compliment that I appreciate the most is that you captured somebody's essence. And, photography is a reflection, right? And so if I can do that in a way that's authentic, that's also, I don't want to use the word flattering because I don't like the idea of sort of feeding into what can be a narcissism around being photographed.
Filters and Photoshop.
Well, not just that. The idea that we have a...
Like you're worthy of being photographed.
Well, there's self-love, but that's different than narcissism. I mean, there's loving oneself for all your imperfections and accepting who you are to the best of your ability. And that's different than narcissism. And I would say that narcissism, unfortunately, is still a very large part of, let's say, Burning Man culture and Western culture in general. We're a very hyper-individualistic society. I mean, you've spent time in America. I don't know of a more individualistic country in the world than America. And that has its pluses and its pluses are we were able to think out of the box and create iPhones and all the amazing technology that we've created and the art we've created in the world. But the downside of that is, of course, a self-centered narcissism. And so I don't like feeding into that, and I'm sure I've been guilty of feeding into that. So, but if I can capture someone's essence in a way that either captures their beauty, but not in a narcissistic way, but it's capturing their essences, their a photograph that is flattering, but also says, wow, you can see their essence in the photo, especially if you knew the person, or you can read into that an emotional expression. And that is that's very inspiring to me to be able to capture that. Yeah.
Do you think these festivals have a way of bringing this essence to the forefront of humans? I feel like, at least, like you said, when people are in nature, they feel a little bit more open. Perhaps in a festival setting where I feel like music is kind of meditation, like active meditation, because it's like the beat kind of just forces you into this moment because there's nothing else but the music that's playing or the silence that is continuing right now. So in these ways, I think festivals are a good place to, or I don't know, it's like a question. Would you think that it's a good place to take pictures? Is that why you did like festival photography specifically?
So there's different things you're bringing up there, and your last question was, you said a bunch of things, but your last question was, are festivals a good place to photograph?
Because of the reasons of essence being in the forefront.
Yeah, and I want to also stipulate that all of us are many people, right? All of us are, what is our essence? We're different people to different people. We are different people in different parts of the day. We are ever changing and flowing, right? So I do think that a festival that allows you to be more open allows, as a photographer, you to capture somebody more in their essence. In other words, they're less guarded, perhaps. They're less putting up that wall, that barrier, that facade that protects them. So if one feels safe in a container, I think, for example, I did this book of nude photography. Almost everybody in the book was not a professional nude model. And I think that Mother Nature really helped provide a container for people to feel nude being photographed by somebody who's not their lover, who's not a close friend of theirs. And so in that way, I think that festivals, yes, they can, especially in nature, they can allow us to open up more and to show, quote unquote, our true essence. And then that can be captured as well through photos. Are festivals good places to photograph? I guess for some people, if you are, I think for, there's different type of photographers. Some photographers are brilliant nature photographers. I know some photographers who are incredible nature photographers, and they will have so much patience and time to wait for the perfect lighting. People photography is a very different, the photographer type is a different personality. You've got to be very engaging. You've got to bring a certain level of energy. You've got to bring a certain level of presence and engagement with people. And not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody's inspired to do that. So if you are somebody who likes to interact through your art, and you enjoy people, and by the way, what I said earlier about the planet not being optimistic, that doesn't mean I don't love the human race. Yes. I just think that unless we're collectively able to shift some major things, I'm not optimistic about how well we're taking care of the planet. But anyway, getting back to festivals, yeah, I think it's a great place. I think it is a good place to photograph if you are able and willing to engage people. I'm not the type of, I come out here with mostly just a prime lens for most of the photos. This book I used a zoom lens, but I don't use like the long lenses. Pretty much everybody in this book knew I was photographing them. There's some crowd shots where people wouldn't know that, but if the main subject is obvious, and of course I spent a lot of time not only for this book but my other books getting model releases from people and getting their consent to be in the book. And so, yeah, if you're willing to engage, festivals are a wonderful place to photograph.
And would you say it's a good place for a beginner? Because I want to, get some like useful tips for people who are just starting out with their photography, and maybe they're thinking, like my stuff is trash. Like who would want to look at my pictures anyway? Like anyone who's kind of getting into the world of photography and may or may not be, satisfied with their job. Is there any tips that you could extend?
Well, again, there's two different questions there. If you want to improve your photography as an amateur photographer, professional photographer means nothing it only means that you make a living at it. It doesn't mean you're good. Just somehow you got the business side of it down enough to make money off of it. In terms of is the container of a festival a good place to hone your photography skills and to get better as a photographer, as an amateur photographer? I would say yes, and in the sense that you have, for example, maybe there's art to photograph, there's people interacting, so you've got subject matter here to work with more than you would. I mean, you have subject matter in a city as well, right? But if you enjoy this atmosphere and you enjoy like the costuming, I see two people walking right now. They got their tattoos, they got their fire tools, their hula hoops. If they're willing to be photographed and you're willing to put out the energy to engage them, then yeah, it's a place that you can hone your skills. So many people these days are taking photos with their iPhone or their smartphone. But if you have a regular DSLR camera, and then your other question is there any tips to becoming a professional photographer? And I would say two things. It is a great time in the world to be a photographer. The equipment available that you can use for not a lot of money, whether it's your smartphone or a DSLR camera, it's a great time. The technology keeps getting better. The software for post editing keeps getting better. It's a great time to be a photographer. It's not a great time to be a professional photographer. Technology is it's one of the reasons why I do a lot of other things like web design and I teach online. It's a lot harder to make a living as a photographer. Why? Because I used to shoot yogis and do videos for them. They can do everything they need pretty much on an iPhone, and it's all and they can upload it instantly on their Instagram account. Them doing yoga, asana flows, and that sort of thing. And so it is not a good time to be a professional photographer. So I don't recommend it for anybody unless they're really good at the business, unless they're really good at self-promotion and they got a good business mind and they like doing photography, but they just love the business of it more than anything. The problem is for most people who want to make a living as a photographer, we might have talent as an artist, but we're not naturally good business people. And my challenge has always been that. I love what I do as a photographer. I've loved photographing the festivals. I've loved doing the photography that I've done for my books. And But in terms of, yeah, the business is tough. I don't recommend it. Even something like you say, like we were talking about web design earlier. Web design is even hard these days. And again, you're competing with people in India versus, if you're in America.
Costs crazy.
Yeah, and the people who make good money, to be honest, like where I live in Santa Cruz, California, the people who make good money, a lot of them work over the hill for corporations. They work for Apple, they work for Facebook, they work for big companies that pay them really good money to continue. What do people spend money on these? They spend money on computers, they spend money on their smartphone, they spend money on clothing, mostly from third world or other countries. And so, yeah, in terms of, photography is basically a service industry, and it is not a good time to be a photographer. Do some people make a good living as a photographer? Yes, but they're far and few between. One can make a decent amount of money as a photographer, but you're not going to do really well unless you have a bunch of people working for you and you've got a business model that's really good. And so, yeah, that's my kind of straight, honest, candid answer about that.
I think that this would apply to a few other disciplines. I call it this. I don't know why I call it discipline, but other career options such as photography. Maybe film would be probably difficult to get into, or even if you do, you kind of have to be super sociable to like meet these producers. And I don't know. I kind of feel like it applies to a lot of things that we do for fun, which also could be done professionally, and you can make money. Would you agree with that?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, the world is changing. Every day it changes more quickly. It used to be, even before my generation, it used to be that you'd have a job and maybe you were a factory worker, or maybe you were a professor, but that would be your job for your entire life. And now you've got to constantly reinvent yourself because technology, whether it was the mass exodus of jobs to Asia and South America, in the manufacturing sector in America, and people who were depending on good jobs, they lost those jobs because the companies figured that they could do it somewhere else cheaper. And technology, yeah, technology is constantly changing. It's constantly, and make things again some ways better and easier. The barriers for entering, becoming a photographer, a professional photographer, are really low, which means it's easy for tons of people to get into it. And I'm 60, and there's plenty of people who are like 22 and hungry and willing to work for way less money than me and willing to work really hard until they get burnt out, sort of thing. And so that's who you're competing with, and that's the reality. And technology is a double-edged sword that way. It allows us greater access, but it also makes it so everybody can pretty much, you're going to hire me for a photo shoot of the family with Grumpy Uncle Bob, or wow, Grumpy Uncle Bob's in a good mood today. I've got my iPhone. Let's snap some photos of him and the family, right? And I don't have to pay anything for it, right? So that's the reality.
I love the way you look at things holistically. It's always a double-edged sword. There's not pure good or pure evil. It's always like this two-ended thing. But I want to use this opportunity to ask you a few questions about your travels, because I'm sure you've traveled a lot. Is there a place that, from all the places that you traveled, that you would go again?
Okay. So, by the way, things shift. I used to spend a lot of time in Bali. Things have really shifted there. Well, I'll jump back to that. But the one place that I will return to again and again, it's my favorite place on the planet. I used to have two favorite places on the planet. One was in Bali, and one is the Eastern Sierra, California. It's where the high desert meets the high alpine, and where it's the hot springs hotspot of the state. I absolutely love the Eastern Sierra, California. Would I live there? I'm not sure. You're really out there in the middle of nowhere. You have Mammoth Lakes and you have Bishop and the towns there. But the nature is just spectacular. And I will go there every year, and I will go back and as long as I can. And again, it's because the nature is just so spectacular and it's easy to access. There are trailheads at 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters. So there you are. You're in this oh my God country. My other favorite place in the world was Eastern Bali, Southeast Bali. Man, I went there for the first time in 2006.
That's below Ubud, right?
So Eastern Bali would be east of Ubud. Ubud's kind of center. Well, no, I'd say it's center Bali. To the south, you have Denpasar, the airport. To the north, you have Singaraja and the beaches way to the north, and the mountains to the north. And to the west, you have Western Bali. And then towards Ahmed. A lot of people know where Ahmed is. It's a kind of a, I guess, a scuba diving. There's some surfing there, a beach town. I loved Southeast Bali for a long time. I would go over there and drive around on my scooter and go up the Mount Soraya, which is a big mountain there with there's temples on it, and you can hike up to these temples. And when I first went there, I remember, I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but there's not too many places in the world that you'll still experience this, where you go and the people look at you and the kids are waving at you, and for them, you are a novelty. And I fell in love. So with that area is my third book. I told you about Natural Beauty, which is my fourth. My third book is a place. It's called Tirtha Ganga. And Tirtha Ganga, Tirtha means water in Balinese, and Ganga means holy, like the Ganges is the holy river. And there is a water palace out there called Tirtha Ganga that I spent a lot of time at, and I photographed for my third book. I photographed the palace, the fountains, the dance performances that took place, and the ceremonies that took place, and the local people there. And I love that part of Bali. I speak good Indonesian, and so that for many years was one of my favorite places in the world. That whole, we're talking about from 2006 to, I would say, the early, like maybe 2012, 13, and yeah. So in the last 10 years, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot in two ways. That whole palace, thanks to Instagram. When I first went there, a couple foreign tourists peeked their heads in a day, and it's a beautiful water palace. Again, it's called Tirtha Ganga, and it's now, because of Instagram and other social media and other promotion. It's I don't know how many people go. Hundreds and hundreds of people go there a day, foreigners and Balinese and Indonesians. And then that whole area, there's a lot of tour buses that come out there. So there's two things that shifted for that area. One is just the amount of people that got discovered. And two, this is going to sound funny, but, I've always looked at the Balinese, and I still do, as probably the most content people in the world that I know.
That's a great word to put it. I think Southeast Asia in general has that energy, but content is.
And if you've not been to Bali, Bali makes the land of the smiles, aka Thailand, look like the land of the frowns.
Whoa.
They smile way more there. Nice. Way more they smile. And they're a very traditional, religious, conservative, patriarchal. I don't go into the deep shadow of Bali around the patriarchy there, but again, it's lovely culture, and I'm the last person to criticize them, nor that I want to be. But Bali still has something very special, but it's overrun with people. I've been actually pulsing people in Bali. What's the scene like? And the consensus I'm getting is lots of traffic, very dense, and lots of construction. And they're this island, which, I don't know if you've been to the Hawaiian Islands, but Bali is half the size of the big island, and it's got 4.5 million people, and it gets about 11 million tourists a year. And the Indonesian government wants 20 million. It's a cash cow for the Indonesian government. And 98% of the tourists who go to Indonesia go to Bali. Maybe they go to Prambanan and Borobudur in East Java, West Central Java, but a few other places, but that's pretty much where they go. And Bali is a Hindu island in a Muslim country, the fourth largest in the world. It is a wonderful place, but it's lost especially Southeast Bali, has lost my own personal status as one of my two favorite places in the world, just because of that. And the smartphone is really, I call the smartphone, it hit Bali in about 2014, 13. I call it their greatest threat to what I would call their happiness quotient. The Balinese, one of the things that I loved about the Balinese, let's say you had a driver that you hired for the day, and you said, we're going to go off for a couple hours. We don't even have to tell them how much time. And during that time, they might go down and get a cup of coffee, and because the Balis love to hang out and talk, just gossip and talk, right? They're very social people. And then you come back, and the driver is just sitting there, not bored, just, I would say, being. If there's an action verb, being, just being. And I love that about the Balinese people. And since 2014, again, more than tourism or foreign people coming in, because the Balinese do a great job of preserving their culture in a lot of ways. They have their own language. They speak Balinese, not Indonesian, to each other generally. They're in ceremony all the time. I sometimes joke, and my Balinese friends agree that they're addicted to ceremony. They spend a lot of time and energy and money on their ceremonies, um, and it's wonderful. What preserves language, ceremony, excuse me, what preserves culture, language, ceremony, family. They're very family focused. They're much more of a what we would call a communitarian society than individualist America. They're almost the other spectrum of that, other side of that. Um, and they got something special. And yet the smartphone is the biggest threat to that. I see young people on it, I see old people on it. It's taking them out of the present moment. And it is, even the land of smiles and contentness, I would say there's less smiling even in Bali than there used to be. Thailand the same way. I came here 20 years ago. People are way more smiley, way more smelly. And in Thailand's obviously changed a lot technologically. If you look at the roads around Chiang Mai, the infrastructure that's been created, and the internet and the technology, and the economy's gone up and everything, and their hospitals have always been excellent, and their medical system has always been very good as long as I can remember. But the technology is that, again, the double-edged sword that we talk about. It is lowering, I think, their level of contentment. Yeah, so, and that's the whole planet in general. And Bali is yeah, I have seen it very clearly. And so we'll see what happens. I'm worried about them in the sense that they're trying to stuff as much as they can on that little island. It doesn't have the infrastructure. It doesn't have the road structure. Like they've done a really good job here. Northern Thailand, the roads that they have here, this is on par with any place in America in terms of the infrastructure that's gone into building good roads for the amount of traffic that's on the roads. Maybe even better in America in a lot of places, right? So, but Bali is not that way at all. So I worry.
I'm fortunate to have had this perception of whenever I'm traveling or whenever I'm choosing something, the second best is always kind of preferred, especially for travel. I mean, look at New York and New Jersey, or like Amsterdam and Den Haag. There's like these near cities and towns. Because before I came to Southeast Asia, obviously everyone's talking about Bali. Like you go online, it's just like, which place to go in Southeast Asia? Bali, like number one, Bali, 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 Bali. And I was like, in my mind, if there's so much about this, then all the people are there, or some sort of diluted experience. And this was me deciding like a year or 2 years ago. But I'm so glad that I started from Thailand and got to know the country. A lot of people just do like, oh yeah, I visited Thailand for a week or a month, or a couple months, 3 months. I don't think that for anywhere in the world that like couple months is justice. Like you can't really say that you've lived somewhere without really knowing at least the basics of the language, having engaged with some locals and understanding like their problems, and choosing between like different parts of Thailand, and deciding on Chiang Mai is just the best decision I've made in my life. I feel like for Bali, yeah, like the more people I speak to, I still want to go and visit, but the more people I speak to, the less I want to visit. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, like everything I said to you about being overrun is true. If you do go and visit, I highly recommend April and May. It's when it's really hot here, and not a great time to be in northern Thailand, especially because of the smoke and just the amount of heat before the rains come. April is probably my favorite month in Bali, and the other reason I like it too, besides the weather being a little bit drier, and is that it's, I don't know, we call it a shoulder season. A lot of people go there in the winter because they're escaping Europe's and North America's winter. And then during the summer, June through August, it's completely packed with Australians and Chinese and European tourists in particular. And of course, today there's a lot of Russians there because escaping the war. And so if you do get a chance to go to Bali, I do recommend going in April and May, which is the time you don't want to be here. But I get it. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I got spoiled. I was there for about a year and a half of COVID, and
Wow, such a nice
oh,
quarantine.
oh my God, yeah, I was here in March of 2020 in Chiang Mai, and one of my friends, like, you better get back to the U.S. They're going to close the border and da da da. And I said, you know what? I know how Americans are. I'm not going to go back to America during all this fear and everything around COVID. I just no. I don't want to end up in ICU and Bali, but I know how the Balinese are going to react to this, and they reacted, basically how I thought they would, and they were pretty chill. They're still very superstitious. There was some weird things that would happen, like you would drive your scooter through a little town heading up to the mountains, and they'd stop you and spray your motorbike with like alcohol to disinfect the motorbike. Like the evil spirits of Corona are in the motorbike. Yeah, I did. At first I was annoyed. Then I was like, you know what? I'm here as your guest. I'm so grateful. Thank you. So I really, yeah, being in Bali during COVID, wow, to be able to like right now in Ubud and even before COVID, between 10 in the morning and 7 o'clock at night, it's a traffic jam. You're just sitting in traffic on your scooter, and it's worse in Canggu and other places. So, but being there during COVID, and also my book, which I told you about earlier, Natural Beauty. I don't say this publicly because it's Muslim Indonesia, where they lump in the art that I do would be considered pornography, which they lump in with homosexuality and pedophilia. Again, it's a Muslim country. When I was living there and we were working on the book, I shot for the book there, and that's what kind of put me over the top for the amount of images. Great nature. We had all these places in nature where you'd go for hours, nobody was around, etc. Right? But I couldn't get my proofs there. The proofs that they give you, we had it printed in Hong Kong, and you look at proofs before you give the final say or final approval for printing for the big run. And I couldn't look at it. I had my producer in New Zealand and my designer in LA. She looked at it, and I had another friend look at it, and I had to trust their judgment, and they did a great job. But yeah, so it's a conservative country. But being there during COVID was amazing because, there was some stuff. There were some people who got deported because I remember there was a photo. We were doing kirtans, and we're all sitting like 80 of us in the room without masks on and just singing to the devotion of kirtans and just connecting and loving the time there and not really living in fear of COVID. It was a bunch of younger people and so then a photo got that was published on Facebook, and then this Indonesian gal published it, and it just people had an uproar in Bali. These foreigners they're not respecting the safety and masks and everything. So there was that, and the guy who produced the event ended up getting deported, and he's now since back. But anyway, other than stuff like that, it was a great time to be in Bali, and really great time to be in Bali. And I went several times to be able to return to the U.S. and get back there without having to do a quarantine. I got kind of lucky in the windows that I returned. But to go back now and just, the crush of everything right now.
I almost don't want to.
Yeah, I'm actually debating. Here we are in March, and I either go back to California this month or I go to Bali. And I'm like, ooh. Love the Balinese culture, love the people. So many things I admire and love about it. So many things that we could learn as Westerners about their culture, the way that they, that they do live more in a communal way, and the way that their emphasis on family and connection, and they're just, easygoing, equanimous way of living. A lot to learn there, but yeah, Bali is there. It's getting milked, and during COVID, it was. I also say about Bali during COVID, nobody went hungry. The people weren't working. 80% of their economy is based on tourism. It was a very high percentage, but people had enough to eat. It's an island that's plenty abundant in terms of growing things, and they did okay. They did all right. And a lot of people were like, we kind of like this. We actually don't like being inundated with tourists. But people's livelihoods still depend on tourism, so it's understandable they want to have it back, and it's come back with a vengeance, basically. Yeah. So I get why you don't want to go.
Well, time flies.
Yes.
We're at the hour mark, actually. So, I want to ask you a million other questions, obviously. I love this conversation. I love engaging with you as a person who loves engaging with other people and, having something concrete and tangible. Tribal Revival, check it out. But, yeah, if you had a chance to time travel and go talk to, like your 18-year-old self, 20-year-old self, is there anything you would say? Do this or don't do this? And no, you cannot say buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I can't say buy Apple stock. I've heard this question before asked on podcasts, and I've never really thought about answering it myself. How would my 18-year-old self? Wow. So when I was 18, I was into a lot of the same things I am now. I was really into climbing and nature. And at 19, I started taking Spanish. I could not count to 5. So I was uno, dos, tres, cuatro. I told you guys that. So I would have said to myself, if going back, I would have said a couple things. I would have said, yeah, do the Spanish thing. Also explore your musical talents more in your 20s. So that's an age where you have a lot of creativity there. Focus on that. Have confidence, and see where you can go. Your skills as a musician and as an entertainer, I guess is the word. I wish I'd perhaps, in retrospect, explored more of that. Don't get distracted by useless things. Stay the course. Enjoy life, but and I don't mean like plan for the future type of thing, but more like, yeah, you got a lot of energy in your 20s, and I put that to learning Spanish, and I became a Spanish professor, so I'm proud of all that. I think that learning Spanish was probably one of the best decisions I've made in my life. Because it opened so many doors. My first wife's from Mexico City, and spent a lot of time in Latin America, and today I can still use Spanish. It's a great language, wonderful culture. And so I would have said continue to do that, but also explore other things. You have the space to do that. Continue to spend time in nature. It would have also been kind of fun. I grew up and I did a lot of rock climbing when I was in my teens, and I was still doing mountaineering and that sort of thing, but I wish that in a way it would have been fun to continue that, because in your 20s and your 30s, I went back to climbing like when I was in my 40s, but in your 20s and 30s you have a lot of energy to really get to a high level that I never quite made in climbing. It would have been kind of cool to do that. I feel grateful today that I still climb, and I'm climbing with guys half my age and still can do it here in Crazy Horse near Chiang Mai in the US. But I would just say that, yeah, I'm kind of going on a tangent to answer your question, but I would say to my 18-year-old self, yeah, stay focused, do the things that you accomplished. Like, I went to graduate school, I got my degrees and everything like that to be a teacher. Continue with that. Open yourself up also to that sort of, I've always considered myself a creative person, but musically, I wish I'd done that more. Yeah, just, I don't want to say live a more efficient life, but live a more full life. And then the other thing I would say, and this is obviously with age you get this, and there's a equanimity and a wisdom that you get with age, and if I could part some things, these are all of us that would experience, to both be more conscious of how you interact with others, because as a young man you can be just kind of clueless, but also giving less a shit about judgment from others. So there's a balance there to go, okay, I own that I could do things better, but also not taking things personally when it's often other people's shit, right? So those would be those two nuggets of wisdom. I would say, really be honest with yourself what you need to own, and other than that, and what you need to change to be the best person you can be within your abilities and what you've been given in life, and also be wise enough or aware enough to know when somebody's putting something on you that, it could be a girlfriend or it could be any interaction that is somebody's putting on you that isn't really your shit, and just to hold that with love and say, okay, I get that's where they're at, and not take it personally.
Lovely. Not taking personally is, like anyone of any age can sort of like make use of that. I particularly love that you said open up musically while we're at a festival. I think a lot of people would benefit from that as well. I think music is just, I heard this one guy, he serves coffee in the morning, sings at night. He performed, I think Sunday night, I'm not sure. But he says, this morning when I was drinking coffee, I was like, so like you play music for a long time? He's like, like sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I do it because music is the best doctor I have had. So I found that really nice and funny, and like it goes parallel with what you said. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, energy, effort, and attention. Is there any parting words, thoughts, ideas you would like to share?
Fatih, stay curious, and thanks for spending some time with me. Might have been right, Cup. All right, awesome, man.